This is episode 71 of Standing Out. Standing Out is a remarkable interview-style podcast with the intention to highlight women and men making outstanding contributions in their field. This podcast is generously sponsored by Think Global. Think Global is a business advisory firm working with women entrepreneurs around the globe to scale their businesses to the next level. Today, I'd like to welcome Wendi Burkhardt. As CEO of Silvernest, Wendi is responsible for driving the company's overall direction and strategic growth, as well as overseeing day-to-day operations. She boasts more than 25 years of technology experience working with venture startups, emerging technology companies, rapid growth tech firms, and Fortune 500 corporations. Her history also includes working with Home Instead, a billion-dollar in-home senior care corporation, as a client. She is a seasoned entrepreneur as well as a mentor and coach to social ventures. Wendi holds a degree in international trade and finance from Louisiana State University and has completed an executive education program at Northwestern University's Kellogg Graduate School of Management. Wendi, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be with you.
Oh, thanks. How did you get your start as an entrepreneur? I know you have experience. And that's a silly question, but I ask it because out of college, I still didn't know what an entrepreneur was. So I want to know how people chose. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, does it count if I count like house cleaning and babysitting when I was 12? Like you, I too did not know what an entrepreneur was. And I grew up in a family where steady, stable, working for a big company. My father was the first one that had gone to college in our family. And so he ended up having a huge career with General Electric Medical. And so my parents were very, they were very conservative about, you work for the company, you get the benefits, you do all these things. And so my early career, I did exactly that. But without knowing it, I landed in a lot of positions in my early opportunities that were entrepreneurial, meaning that I ended up in jobs over and over again that were not defined. And so I think it was really by accident. One of the things that happened sort of over the course of the first, 8 or 10 years of my career was I kept landing in positions where I had to design it, figure it out, build it, solve the problem. And I think that the net result of that was I figured out I probably don't follow rules well. And I have a short attention span and I like to build things. And I think at the heart of being an entrepreneur is really the desire to build, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, and we need ecosystems that have everybody. Like we need builders and we need maintainers, but I am so not a maintainer. So I think that's really what happened. And then I had the opportunity to join, participate in other opportunities that allowed me to recognize that further.
How did Silvernest become a thing?
Yeah, Silvernest was a surprise. It's a surprise thing. It was a surprise thing. I had come out of my last venture, which was a B2B fintech company, and had taken some time off and was approaching a certain middle-aged time in my life where you kind of think, what do I really want to do? And had a strong recognition that I really wanted to do something that had impact, and also thought I would move away from technology, which that just doesn't happen. If you've been in it, you're just going to be in it. It just is a thing,
It seems like everyone's wanting to move into technology.
Well, and now tech isn't, it's funny, right? Because now I always say tech really isn't a thing anymore. It's like it's the supporting mechanism for everything, right? So I was kind of in a exploratory period, met some great friends who had been in the aging space, and they'd been developing some unique group home concepts that took an existing residential property in an existing neighborhood and then prepared it to allow 6 or 7 individuals to live in the home collectively, particularly individuals who were in an advanced state of cognitive decline. And they recognized in that the abundance of available real estate right now. There are like 50 million empty bedrooms in the country. So It's surprising that we have such significant housing shortages, to be honest. But at the same time, my dad passed away, and my mom lives in Atlanta. And she met my dad in high school. They'd lived, she'd only ever been with him. And before that, her parents, so she'd never lived on her own. And in the process of losing my dad, she ended up having a close friend become a roommate for 8 months. So when my friend said, hey, here's a big opportunity, it made a lot of sense to me. And I think anybody that's, especially at my age in life, when you've experienced the transitions of your family in aging and know how challenging and painful and difficult it is for people to have to consider leaving a home they're in, or making really hard decisions about their housing solution, it just was painfully obvious to me. So that's how we started. In fact, and the funny part of the story is I was sort of resisting. They asked me to come in and partner with them, and I was like, no, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do next, and I really want to do impact. And my husband's like, hello. So that's why I say it's kind of a surprise. Like, I was helping and doing some consulting to them and telling them what to do, and my husband's like, yeah, so right, I think it's here. Yeah.
That stat you shared, how many empty bedrooms?
There are 50 million empty bedrooms in the United States.
Wow. We have, our kids are young, they're 6 and 9, but my husband and I often joke when they move out, we'll have like his and her bedrooms, because they have a Jack and Jill, and they're a mirror image of each other. So I can see how there end up being a lot of extra bedrooms, and to have that additional support is.
Well, and I think what's even more important in the conversation is it's less really about that, because not everybody's in a position to, do something with that bedroom, nor would it make sense per se. But I think the bigger conversation is we talk a lot, particularly in tech entrepreneurship, about millennials, and millennials being so influential because they're a large demographic. They're 75 million strong. But in the course of the next, 11 years, our 50 plus population, our aging population in the United States, and again, globally, but in the United States is going to be 136 million, which is twice the size of the millennials. Wow. And this next generation comes into aging with a very different perspective, some significant challenges, most notably the fact that they have not saved enough in their retirement. So we've got about 50 million people who have less than $50,000 in the bank. So the way that we age now has to change, and we have to figure out some new solutions. So that's what we're here to do.
Is that, and you're talking about Gen X then? Is that
it's really the boomers.
Okay.
It's the boomers, and the boomers, not unlike everything else that they've done before them, they've changed everything, right? So they change everything that they touch because they're so big. Yeah. And aging is no exception. And they, in many ways, when you look at the aging ecosystem, like they're the ones that have really been dealing with aging families and parents and looking at the existing options and saying, oh my gosh, this really sucks. No one wants this option. I don't want to go to assisted living. I want to stay at home. I want to be in community. So I think they're going to change the way that we age and hopefully bring us back together.
Yeah, I love that. What do you think is, as an entrepreneur, I feel like we all talk about that roller coaster we're on. Some days, some days I'm like, do I really want to do this? How do you recover from a tough day, and how do you stick to it,
Yeah. Well, I think, oh my gosh. I mean, I always tell everybody being an entrepreneur is like having the worst case of bipolar, right? Because the happiest days are the happiest, the worst days are the worst. It takes a certain tenacity. And I tell people, I work with a lot of young entrepreneurs, and it's one of the things that I tell them is there's no steady stable. You're never going to get to the end point. You aren't. You're in an evolution every single day. And so first and foremost, you need to build your ecosystem within your team. So for strong support, and that's probably, I was thinking that actually this morning. I was doing a little meditation, which is the other thing that I do a lot of. And just recognizing like, wow, my team is my bench, and they are who make me happy. They are what give me strength. They make me calm. And so I think we share in all of this together. And I think that's huge. I also think that from a practical standpoint, I've participated in a couple of different CEO organizations and forums that I've been invited to participate in. And I think that's critical too, because I think you really need a safe zone to be able to express like your fears, your concerns, your anxieties, your, everything that, we all feel, and understand that everybody is going through the same thing. It's all very common. And then have that support system that you can lean into, because your team can only do that to a certain point, and your friends and family can only do that to a certain point. And then I think it's about tapping into other people who know what you're going through.
Yeah. How did you go about finding your CEO level support network?
A lot of it is just through personal network. And so I think that particularly as an early entrepreneur, we all get so absorbed in our businesses, and, your every day is like a heads down, like, oh my gosh, we've got to get this thing done.
Right.
And I would say it's really critical, however, that you build your networks out and keep making yourself available to your ecosystem, whether it's through the same type of industry focus, whether it's a local or geographical sort of network. I think it's really critical that you tap into that, because those networks are what brought me those resources.
Right.
And I think that's an important thing it's an important tool in your toolbox.
Definitely. I was just talking to a friend last night, and we were talking about how relationships are a true investment, and they take a lot of time to really maintain a solid relationship. And as we get busier, we were kind of complaining about, well, how do I keep in touch with everyone? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think so, like, we're so connected these days that I think there's just more people to keep in touch with, which is fantastic. But I'd love to know how you balance that. Like, yes, technology helps us keep in touch, but how do you know? I always feel like, oh, darn it, I haven't talked to her in 6 months,
Right. Oh my gosh. So I always say that, one of the sacrifices that I make, unfortunately, is the quality time that I desire and aspire to with my family, my friends, my husband, my dog. They probably sacrifice the most. I mean, there have been nights, particularly when I'm fundraising, that, I'm up until God knows when, and I'll crawl into bed and look at my husband and be like, hi, like, I'm your wife, I'm still here. And I'm lucky to be old enough that I have a lot of my like known relationships who don't get offended if I haven't talked to them in 3 or 4 weeks, months, whatever that looks like,
It does. Yeah, that's really great. If you had a list of best kept secrets, what maybe books or TED Talks or podcasts would be on that list?
Admittedly, I don't have much time for TED Talks, so that's one of the things that's gone to the wayside. So, yikes. I am a secret fan, admittedly, of Richard Branson, and I follow a lot of his, posts. I've always studied him because I love his energy, and I love the place that he's in right now, which is really focused on give back. Yeah. But I think, his story is really one about taking risk and then recognizing the amount of failure that it takes before you get to a success. And so I think that's probably the biggest tip that I can share is there are very few people who get it right out of the gate, and we're all going to fail over and over again on a number of different things, big or small. And I think making sure that you allow room for that is really, really critical, right? And being compassionate for yourself in that journey is important. I also, one of the things that I talk a lot about is chemistry is critical in an early company, and hiring is 50% about the experience and 50% about the personality and the cultural fit of someone. And particularly in a small size business, as you're trying to scale, you need to trust your gut about how someone feels in your ecosystem. And if, I always say, hire slow, fire fast. Right. If somebody's not a fit, you need to remove them immediately, because that can be one of the most toxic elements to growing a business when you're starting out.
That makes a lot of sense. Going back to what you were saying about Richard Branson and failing, there's this a meme or infographic that circles on Facebook that I really love, and it it tells you how many times I think Walt Disney failed before getting funding for Mickey Mouse, or how many publishers J.K. Rowling went before getting picked up for Harry Potter, like, or the light bulb, like just some really, we don't hear about that, you know, and I think it's important to share those stories too, because so much of what we see on social media is great success, you know, overnight success. And I think a lot of us, our egos get entangled in that, and we feel like we're never going to get to whatever place it is we want to get to. You know?
Oh, great. Just remember, I always tell people, like, go read the story of Airbnb and where they started out and how long it took them before they actually got momentum. So it feels like they've been here forever. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it really took them a good 3.5, almost 4 years of, you know, effort before they really started to blow up. So they've got a great story. And I think it's something everybody should know, because it was long past 2 years before they started to really see the fruit of their success.
I'll have to check that out. I was an early adopter of Airbnb. I think I had a friend who somehow knew the founders, and so we got in early. But I think all I hear about Airbnb is their growth hacking strategies and how quickly that went, you know? And so I think it is important to know it didn't go as quickly as we think it did. You know?
Yeah. I think they've been in business. I have to go back and look, but I believe they started in, it was either 2008 or 2009. Okay. So they've almost been at it 10 years. So when you look at the valuation that they're at, the growth rates that they've had, you know, it's important to just remember the time that it's taken to be there.
That's really smart. As we wrap up, what is one thing that's on your radar as an industry expert that you think we'll all be talking about in another year or two from now?
Well,
hot topics.
You know, hot topics. I mean, most certainly, I think the development of AI, you know, which is a hot topic now, but I think the evolution of artificial intelligence will continue to fundamentally change technology and how we employ technology with an efficiency that we just don't even understand yet. And then I think in my world, because we're focused in aging, robotics, I think, are another big part of the conversation that are coming. And it's robotics in home, robotics, you know, whether it's robotics in the form of self-driving cars or actually true in-home, like robotics that are caregivers. And I think we're going to start to hear a lot more around that as well.
That's really cool. My kids are waiting for a robot that cleans their room. So
Me too.
That's really insightful, though. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Wendi, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Oh, good. You're welcome.